You're listening to The Extra Real with Jared Brown
and Colin Ryan for a look at the bigger picture of film.
with films from around the world,
Through the decades,
from movies you know and love.
to movies you need to discover.
So for me, the whole reason behind doing this podcast was, I think there were several reasons really. And the first one was I've listened to so many podcasts where they're not about the films, they're more about the podcaster. And I was becoming a bit frustrated with that, because you could listen to a 20-minute podcast where it's two people talking back and forth about themselves and the viewing experience, and with very little actual reviews of the film. So for me, the most important thing is to be able to cut straight into talking about the films.
Yeah, definitely. We kind of and then we touch on a lot of things, I guess, outside of the film. Like if we touch on historical contexts or what was going on in maybe a filmmaker or actor's life at the time, you add a bit of something else, something extra to the film viewing experience, I think.
This has to be about films for people who love films.
Exactly. And it's also got to be, you got to look at films that maybe you haven't seen or heard about, or maybe you've read a small bit about, but there's no episode on them, and no podcast episodes on them, maybe things like that.
Absolutely. Like for me, this podcast is to help people to basically to find new films and to dig a little bit deeper about the films that they know and love already. And we've done that with our selections throughout. There are films that are kind of hidden gems, there are films that are established classics, there are films that are box office hits in the mix. Each episode adds layers to all of these films and gives you a good overview of the productions and what's going on around and behind it.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the joys, isn't it, of watching films, especially if you watch it with someone, or you're friends with someone who has a similar, let's say, taste to you, is kind of that you both seen it, having that conversation afterwards over a cup of coffee or a pint or whatever. That's kind of like that's really fun, isn't it?
Yeah, coming from a short filmmaking background and having directed a few of my own pieces and having worked primarily in documentaries, but also having worked with different groups, I wanted to look at, well, have I now got a fresher perspective and how I look at the process of making films and of watching films, and an appreciation for maybe directors that are a bit unsung. There's something derogatory when you say to some people that guy's a very good jobbing director, but it's actually something that I mean in the highest esteem, because it's someone who's achieved a professional competency where they're looked upon as someone that can deliver a film within a budget. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe subjectively the film is a bag of rubbish, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the fact that there's a whole crew out there who are providing top quality work to make something a professional product. And so maybe I'm looking at that side of it a bit more. It's not that I'm more forgiving, but it's just another element to look at in the whole film criticism, which I don't think gets enough due.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's also the idea, like, I don't think anyone on a film crew goes into work every day and goes, let's make something terrible. There's always the idea that everyone is doing their best and working really hard, whatever the limitations are, I suppose.
Yeah.
I was always interested in film scripts, reading film scripts, writing film scripts, and you don't exactly know how many different powers are at play when a film gets made, in terms of like how many writers are involved, how many drafts the actual script went through before the film was made, what, like, maybe the locations they chose changed everything within the script, or maybe like weather or something like that changed the filming on the day. So I've always been kind of interested in that kind of the kind of genesis of it to the actual film getting made itself, and then obviously the last kind of part of the rewriting process, which is kind of editing the film.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, like, this series, we haven't really gone looking at any Irish films, and that's deliberate. I think, there are a lot of good Irish film podcasts out there, and I didn't feel like we needed to go back over it. Also, I also feel like there's an awful lot of um, disingenuous film criticism. Like Irish films seem to be handicapped in the press. It's almost like I've rarely seen one get less than 4 stars. And you're looking at some of them sometimes, and you're listening to other people in the scene, and you're just hearing things, negative things. And when we've seen the films, you're disappointed, and you know, I don't want this to be a thing knocking Irish film. I want to embrace really good films, and whether they're low budget or high budget, whether they come from Screen Ireland or whether they're self-made, and you know, I've seen good films, but I don't want to be on that fence where you see so many people on Twitter saying something's amazing and things aren't. So I don't want to be disingenuous to films. I want to give genuine, fair criticism and objective criticism of the stuff that we're reviewing, no matter whether it's Irish or international.
Yeah, the Irish film one's always an interesting one, I think, because yeah, it's we come from a small island, I guess, and you know, there's only going to be so many films a year. I always find it's hard with Irish films, like in terms of distribution, it's how well they travel. That seems to be an issue, and I guess, like you're saying, when you see a lot of these 4-star reviews, you're like, "Oh, this film's great." Like, I hope it, like, you know, people abroad and find out about it, but it kind of seldom happens, and you always wonder why that is. And as you said, at times you can watch something and be like disappointed and not really see where the filmmaker was coming from. And I guess critics, they always have to be kind of wary of, like, maybe they're friends with someone on the crew, or maybe they're friends with the director, and that can shatter their judgment, you know?
Yeah, I actually think it's a very strange time in film criticism, because I think there's so much pressure on critics um, from the point of view of trying to get content, trying to engage with the filmmakers, that you don't want to piss them off.
No. But I think we always want to do this because we just love talking about film. I think since we've met, we
Absolutely.
just talk about films. We're two people who basically, have you seen this? And usually with you, the answer is yes.
Yeah,
But
but
that's kind of the fun of
you've
it, you
seen a
know?
lot as well, and I think the thing
No, I
is,
have.
you know, I think we have our core areas where we're interested. Like, I know I'm into westerns, I know I'm into classic films, and I know, um, but I'm also into, you know, world cinema. Um, like everyone else, the latest big film that's out, I want to see it. Um,
No, for sure. And look, you know, at times I can go see stuff that's extremely experimental, but that's not to say I didn't love the Avengers films, you know? And I think with a podcast like this, we're trying to bridge that gap between, I guess, kind of mainstream and art house, where you have a feel, if you're listening to a film podcast, it has to be, you know, highbrow or whatever. For us, we enjoy if you can see a terrible, you know, indie art house film, world film, as much as you can see an amazing mainstream film.
we're looking at finding great films.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And you know, there's a great feeling when you find something, and you know, 2 hours later, you're just like, "This, that was amazing." And the first thing you want to do is just recommend it to people. And I think this kind of podcast gives something like that a voice. We love all the process. We love how they get made. We love the stories behind them, and we just enjoy the viewing experience. But we also want to give people a bit more. We also want to, you know, find the film that maybe on your streaming service, whatever it is, that is not advertised to you, that you do have to kind of search for.
So, coming up in episode 1, we've got Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which was a treat to do. This is an episode that I loved doing, and it's one I think people are going to want to listen to. It's such a rich episode. I mean, we talk about so much, and funnily enough, something like Miyazaki seems to come up an awful lot in over the course of the episodes. And there's I think one of my favorite things was the discovery of a certain type of shot that connects, that links us with a later episode or Porco Rosso episode. So that was one of my high points of the Portrait of Lady on Fire first episode. What about
Yeah,
you?
I absolutely loved Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It was the first time I'd seen it. I know you'd seen it before, but I was blown away, and I was just so envious I hadn't seen it in the cinema. I just exactly what the cinema is designed for, really.
Yeah, I think if you want to listen to us talk about having orgasms, that's the episode.
True.
Okay, so episode 2, we watched Knights of
Knights of
Cabiria.
Cabiria by Fellini. lovely bridge in between his near-realist stuff to his more kind of fantastical, dreamlike stuff.
Yeah, I think this was just, it was great. I think we were at a stage in the process where we wanted to do like an all out, master of cinema. So Fellini was the pick, and again, this is a great episode because we get to talk about what's going on in Italy at the time. We get to talk about Giulietta Messina, and we get to talk about Fellini. So that's enough, really. Um, Episode 3.
Yeah, Aiming Out, sports film, John Sayles, baseball. We're not baseball fans, but this is an excellent film.
This was kind of like an outside pick because generally speaking, I'm of the opinion baseball films aren't great. And this film blew me away. I mean, I've seen some John Sayles films beforehand, and I was like, baseball film, haven't heard much about it. This is an absolute cracker, and definitely an episode people need to listen to if they want to discover a really great film, and definitely what I would describe as a hidden gem, particularly for people in this side of the world.
No, for sure, and also a film that shows how you can juggle a huge cast and tell a really interesting story and not lose pace or anything like that. It's really, really good stuff.
It's brilliant. Episode 4, we did something a little bit different here.
Yeah, we looked at Abu Dasuf, which is Breathless, and also its remake, Breathless.
Yeah, so this one was unique because we came up with a scoring system, and basically it's like a versus, we put them against each other. You'll have to tune in really to see who won that one, but it's definitely a nail biter.
We looked at Long Day's Journey into Night by emerging filmmaker B. Gann, and really cool because it's got a 1 hour tracking shot within it.
Yeah, that was reason enough to watch it, and it's also nice to slot in a slice of slow cinema. I think we were building up to needing that, a bit of a come down, especially after our double Breathless. So,
for sure. And speaking of Miyazaki, of course, we looked at his 1992 film Porco Rosso about a flying pig.
We just wanted to look at a master of cinema, and this was one of a number of options for Miyazaki. There are a few films where you've got pirates and pigs together. And definitely this is a nice lean episode that people need to listen to.
So we looked at I know you're a big Western guy, Jer, and we had a good look at Clint Eastwood's Outlaw Josie Wells.
I think, this is one of my personal faves, and I think one of the things I love most about watching any type of film is watching it with somebody else or getting a person's opinion on something for their first time. So I think because you hadn't seen it, I really wanted to watch it to get your reaction to it, and I think this is an episode where you're going to find out a whole host about the actual production. You're going to find out what the Eastwood rule is. Really good stuff coming up in that episode, and also we'll find out about the ill-fated sequel.
Yes, definitely. With the Outlaw Josie Wells as well, if you're a big fan of revisionist westerns and you've seen like the Dollars Trilogy and things like that, then if you've missed this is definitely one to have a look at. Cool. And then we ended on The Five Bloods, Spike Lee's latest film.
Yeah, so look, Spike Lee, he's always going to have a couple of talking points. It's a very pertinent film for the current world context, and I think this is one of our best episodes.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. We get to talk about Marvin Gaye, which I always love doing because he's all over the soundtrack here. Very interesting in terms of de-aging and how that works in modern cinema.
Yeah, and also the stuff about the aspect ratio. So if you want to hear us wax lyrical about multiple aspect ratios, this is the episode for you.
Thank you very much for listening. You can contact the show by emailing to extrareal@gmail.com. Search for the Extra Real Podcast on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. You can listen to the show on Spotify, iTunes or anywhere you get your podcast from.